Cloudlet, working on the OpenAI FP7 project, and quite timely fits in with the old presentation that he just gave. So public data and publicly accessible APIs and how that's going to work. Just quickly to introduce you to what OpenAI is, I won't dwell too much on it as we're talking about Cloudlets. But OpenAI, the concept for OpenAI is twofold. It's a consumer-centric open source platform. For the consumer, what it will allow them to do is control of their data. It's going to control where their data is, and it will control who their data can be given to. And from an application developer's perspective, what it will allow them to do is have a generic way of accessing that data, but also in accessing data that previously wouldn't have been available. So as we all were saying, the publicly data that's now going to become available about people and how they do that. So that's just briefly what OpenAI is about. So to talk about the cloudlet, consumers or people have this concept. Just quickly to introduce you to what OpenAI is, I won't dwell too much on it as we're talking about cloudlets. But OpenAI, the concept for OpenAI is twofold. It's a consumer-centric open source platform. For the consumer, what it will allow them to do is control of their data. It's going to control where their data is, and it will control who their data can be given to. And from an application developer's perspective, what it will allow them to do is have a generic way of accessing that data, but also in accessing data that previously wouldn't have been available. So as we all were saying, the publicly data that's now going to become available about people and how they do that. So that's just briefly what OpenAI is about. The amount of data that belongs to you, or that you should own, that's in existence is quite large. So this is what I term as your digital presence. This is you digitally somewhere. And even when you delete some of this data, it's restored in a repository. It's still actually there, even though it's no longer visible. So that gets me to the concept then, or one of the key concepts that we're trying to get at in the OpenAI project. And it's the idea of what is a personal cloudlet. And I got parachuted in to do this for Eric. So I've been struggling to try and get what is a visual representation of a personal cloudlet, or how do I see a personal cloudlet. And I ended up at a cone. And I've had a few different variations of it, so it looks nothing like a cloud. But your data isn't in a cloud. But what I'm trying to get at here, though, is that your data will no longer be a silo approach. So you won't have a silo approach just for your health data, because that's not how it actually exists. And you won't have a silo approach for your social data, or a silo approach. So a cone has the idea of segments that are interlaced. My graphics weren't good enough to show you an interlaced segment, but you get the idea. But what we're aiming to do then is that as you progress higher up the cone, and as the concentration gets more dense, the security aspects of that data will become more difficult to get at. So for someone who wants to get into top tier of your financial data, you're pretty much going to make sure that you know who they are or why they want to use that data. Whereas if you're down the bottom layer and it's social data, it's probably I heard on the radio this morning they've coined a new term for sending updates on what you had for your dinner. So you post a picture. So you're down on that level. You don't really care who sees it. It's not going to change a whole lot. So the idea then is to allow multiple levels of access or ways of getting access into that, and then allowing application developers to be able to process that data and incorporate and integrate the data with them.
So I've got a key, so the idea is this: some application developer, he's looking to do an application in the area of e-government. He wants something very secure, something to do with your PPS, your social security, wants some social data on you, and also wants some health data. They will have applied somehow for a key, and that key will open the data for you. Now, there are lots of problems with how you do that, and lots of problems on how the privacy aspects kick in. So we have some challenges to overcome. We don't want to introduce a new governing body on authoring applications. We don't want to have a very convoluted handshaking mechanism where each transaction has 4 or 5 levels of security and 4 or 5 levels of privacy, and then kind of the end result was no. Anyhow, you can't have the data. But we believe it should be possible for a user to allow this data to be accessed by application developers. So once you have the right key and once you're able to store that, then this data becomes available. So you can see that the cloudlet owner, or the person who owns that data, is the person who controls how their data is going to be used. So in the example, they've taken some of their health and some of their social data, and they've agreed that, okay, you as the developer of this application, I'm going to give you the data because I trust what you're going to do with it, or I know what you're going to do with it, and I want that data. And for the application developer, then obviously this is going to open up new doors of application development. Michal touched on it as well. It's going to open up areas where we can incorporate legacy type systems and data that just simply didn't exist before, and public data. So how we can incorporate these into new applications is going to be quite exciting. But overall, the user controls the data, and it's the cloudlet owner who agrees that this is an application use I want to take on or not. So the question is, why should we care, or why do we want a cloudlet? Why do we want to control our data? And probably in a talk on developing app economy, apps is becoming a dirty word. And it will become more so in the next months and years. To give some examples, there's a free app you can download at the moment. It's called Best Alarm Clock. It has a privacy negotiation or a privacy policy on it. It says if you want to use this application, we want to take your location data. They actually also take your address book data as well, unbeknown to them. But what they do with the data then as well is they send it on to a third party. So they're sending your location and your phone ID to a third party. And we don't know who the third party is. There's another simple application. It's a flashlight. You can download it for your Android or your iPhone. Most people I know that have a smartphone have downloaded this at some point. It doesn't ask you for privacy. It doesn't tell you what it's going to do, but it actually looks at your address book and it looks at your current location and it takes that data back. Angry Birds, probably very few people in the room haven't played it, downloaded it. Again, has a privacy policy, asks you can it take your data, also checks your address book, but it takes the data and again sends it on to a third party. It sends their context, the location, your phone ID, and your username and your password. And they actually had a response. This is the source of this is the New York Times. And their response to the Times was, well, it's for our marketing purposes. We want to see how better we can target our audience. I mean, I've played Angry Birds. I'm not sure how my location helps them in their marketing, but there you go. And more of this is going to come out. There's an App Authority report in February 2013 and they analyse the apps that are in existence at the moment. And they've found that 79% of the top 100 free apps are taking users' data unbeknownst to the user. So this will have a backlash because people really don't know what data has been taken from them and why. But in terms of a more kind of generic argument as to why we're moving towards a pervasive society. As a researcher, that's brilliant. It's minefield after minefield of interesting topics to pick from. But as a user, we're moving towards that pervasive society because people are using our data unbeknownst to us. So we're not pervasively engaging with the society. And again, I'm not sure that society is ready for a pervasive environment just yet. The whole mobile area, it's quite new, and the data that we're taking is quite new. And I believe this is a problem, and I believe this is why we should be more conscious of our own data and how we can get to that data, and more importantly, who is using that data and why do you want to use it. That takes me to the end. As I said, I'm on the OpenEye project. That's me. We have some partners across the EU. So we have Ireland, Greece, Germany, Spain, the UK. And hopefully this is interesting you to get some more information. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I think you gave us some very important insights on how we can manage our personal space in the cloud and what is the concept of the cloud, raising key questions and concerns about privacy of data, security, how we are going to handle them. Our next speaker, George, is going to talk to us a little bit more about the economics.